My name is Howard, and my life turned upside down the night my wife, Beverly, came back from her business trip. We'd been married for 10 years. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but I always believed we were a team. That night shattered every ounce of that belief. Beverly worked as a manager for a small marketing firm. Lately, she'd been traveling more and more, and I always tried to be supportive. This time, she was heading to Savannah for 4 days for some kind of conference. Nothing exciting, she said while packing her business suits into her suitcase. Just presentations and meetings. Her tone was so confident, so casual, that I didn't question it for a second. I kissed her goodbye and told her to have a safe trip, but something felt off. For the last couple of months, Beverly had been distant. She wasn't cruel or cold, but it was as if her mind was always somewhere else. She smiled less, and when she did, it felt forced. At first, I thought it was work stress. Her firm was pushing for bigger clients, and she often came home late, claiming she had to attend dinners or networking events. I never pressed her. She was my wife, and I trusted her. At least I did. When she came home that Friday night, everything about her screamed different. She walked through the front door laughing, a loud, almost theatrical laugh. She looked radiant in a way that felt wrong. Her hair was perfectly done, her makeup flawless, her clothes too pristine for someone who just spent hours on a plane. She didn't look like someone returning from a grueling work trip. She looked like someone who had just stepped off the set of a photo shoot. "Howard, you won't believe the week I've had," she exclaimed, her voice overly cheerful as she dropped her suitcase by the door. She was glowing, her cheeks flushed, her smile wide, but it wasn't the glow of exhaustion or relief. It was the glow of something else. I couldn't put my finger on it at the time, but the sight of her made my stomach churn. "You look happy," I said, trying to force a smile. "Was it a good trip?" "Oh, it was amazing," she replied, tossing her coat onto the chair. "The presentations went great, and I met some really interesting people. Networking is everything in this industry, you know." She started rambling about some marketing strategies and keynote speakers, but I wasn't really listening. I was too busy trying to reconcile the woman standing in front of me with the woman I kissed goodbye 4 days ago. Something didn't add up, but I pushed the thought aside, telling myself I was just being paranoid. As she talked, I noticed her suitcase still sitting by the door. I reached for it, intending to carry it upstairs, but as soon as I grabbed the handle, she stopped mid-sentence. "Oh, don't worry about that," she said quickly, her voice just a bit too sharp. "I'll take care of it later." I froze. Beverly never cared about her luggage before. She'd usually let me haul it upstairs without a second thought. Her sudden possessiveness struck me as odd, but I let it go. "You must be exhausted," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "Why don't you sit down? I'll make some tea." "Sure," she said, her smile faltering for just a moment before she regained her overly bright demeanor. "That sounds great." As I walked into the kitchen, my mind started racing. Why was she acting so strange? Why did she look so different? And what was in that suitcase that she didn't want me to see? I made the tea, brought it to her, and sat across from her at the dining table. She sipped her tea, glancing at her phone every few minutes, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Finally, I decided to confront it gently. "So," I began, keeping my tone casual, "did anything interesting happen on your trip?" Her eyes flickered just for a second, but it was enough. "Interesting? No, not really," she said, a bit too quickly. "Just work stuff?" She was lying. I didn't know what about, but I could feel it in my gut. Beverly was hiding something, and I was determined to find out what it was. Little did I know, the answer was already sitting right there, in that suitcase by the door. That night, I couldn't sleep. Beverly had gone to bed early, claiming she was exhausted from the trip, but I knew better. The way she avoided eye contact, her sudden defensiveness over the suitcase, and the overly cheerful front she'd put on, it was all eating away at me. I lay there staring at the ceiling, the sound of her steady breathing beside me doing little to calm my racing thoughts. By 2 a.m., I couldn't take it anymore. I slipped out of bed as quietly as I could, my heart pounding in my chest. Beverly's suitcase was still downstairs, sitting exactly where she'd left it by the front door. I crept down the stairs, the creak of the wooden steps sounding deafening in the silence of the house. When I reached the suitcase, I hesitated. What was I doing? Was I really about to go through my wife's belongings? It felt wrong, invasive, but the nagging feeling in my gut wouldn't let me walk away. Something was off, and I needed answers. I unzipped the suitcase slowly, careful not to make too much noise. At first glance, everything seemed normal. Her clothes, some toiletries, a pair of heels. But as I dug deeper, I found something that made my blood run cold. At the bottom of the suitcase was a small velvet pouch. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a necklace, gold with a heart-shaped pendant. It wasn't hers. I knew every piece of jewelry Beverly owned, and this wasn't one of them. It was delicate, too delicate for her taste. And then I saw the inscription on the back. To my love, always. My mind raced. Who gave this to her? Why was she hiding it? I clutched the necklace in my hand, feeling a mix of anger and heartbreak welling up inside me. But that wasn't all. Underneath the pouch was something even more damning. A receipt for a dinner reservation at an upscale restaurant in Savannah. The date was from 2 nights ago. 2 people. A romantic corner table. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped the receipt. Beverly had told me she was working late that night, attending a networking dinner with colleagues. But this wasn't networking. This was something else entirely. I sat down on the floor, clutching the necklace and the receipt, my mind reeling. I wanted to wake her up, to demand answers, but part of me wasn't ready. I needed more. If I confronted her now, she'd just lie. She was good at that. No, I needed to be sure before I said anything. The next morning, I tried to act normal, though every glance at Beverly made my stomach churn. She was her usual self, bright and chatty, as if nothing was wrong. She kissed me on the cheek before leaving for work, humming to herself as she walked out the door. I watched her drive away, a cold sense of dread settling over me. As soon as she was gone, I grabbed her suitcase and went through it again, searching for anything I might have missed. That's when I found the burner phone. It was hidden in a side pocket, tucked beneath a scarf. My hands shook as I turned it on. The screen lit up, and my heart sank as I saw a flurry of messages from a number saved as M. I miss you already. Last night was incredible. Can't wait to see you again. Don't forget our little secret. I stared at the screen, my chest tightening with every message I read. Whoever this M was, they weren't just a passing fling. This was serious. I scrolled through the messages, my heart breaking with each one. There were pictures too, selfies of Beverly smiling, posing in ways that made me feel sick to my stomach. These weren't pictures she'd ever sent me. I didn't know what to do. My world was collapsing, and I felt powerless to stop it. I put everything back in the suitcase, careful to leave it exactly as I'd found it. Then I sat there, in the middle of the living room, trying to process what I'd just discovered. That evening, Beverly came home like nothing had happened. She kissed me on the cheek, asked about my day, and laughed at some story from work. I played along, smiling and nodding, all while feeling like I was dying inside. Every laugh, every touch, every word from her felt like a dagger in my chest. But I couldn't keep it up for long. As we sat down for dinner, I finally cracked. Beverly, I said, my voice trembling, who's M? Her fork froze halfway to her mouth. For a split second, her face went pale, but she quickly recovered, plastering on a fake smile. What are you talking about? She asked, her tone light. But her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place, fear. I leaned forward, my heart pounding. Don't lie to me. I saw the messages. I know about the necklace, the dinner. I know everything. She stared at me, her face a mix of shock and anger. For a moment, I thought she was going to deny it, to spin another web of lies, but instead, she laughed. A cold, bitter laugh that sent chills down my spine. You think you know everything? She said, her voice dripping with disdain. You don't know the half of it, Howard. And with that, she got up from the table and walked out of the room, leaving me sitting there, stunned. I had no idea what she meant, but I was about to find out. Beverly's words haunted me all night. You don't know the half of it, Howard. What was that supposed to mean? I replayed the conversation over and over in my head, trying to make sense of it. Her reaction wasn't what I expected. It wasn't the panic, denial, or tearful apology I thought I might get. Instead, it was almost defiant, like she was daring me to dig deeper. And so I did. The next morning, I waited for Beverly to leave for work before heading straight to the suitcase. The burner phone was still there, but this time I scrolled further back through the messages with them. There were months of them. Dinner plans, hotel bookings, suggestive texts. Things I never imagined my wife could say to anyone, let alone someone who wasn't me. It was like reading messages from a stranger. Then I found the most damning message yet. It was sent just a few days before her trip. I can't wait to get away with you. Howard has no idea. This will be the best week ever. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. She wasn't just sneaking around. She was openly mocking me. I felt like a fool, a blind, gullible idiot who'd been played for God knows how long. But I wasn't done. I needed to know who M was. I took the burner phone and used a reverse number lookup tool online. It didn't take long to find a name, Marshall Connors. The name meant nothing to me at first, but a quick search of his social media made my blood boil. Marshall wasn't just some random guy. He was Beverly's old high school boyfriend. I remembered her mentioning him a few times when we were dating, always with an air of nostalgia. I never thought much of it. After all, high school was ancient history, or so I thought. Marshall's profile was full of photos of him flexing at the gym, posing with expensive cars, and sipping cocktails on yachts. He was the walking cliché of a midlife crisis, and apparently, Beverly found that irresistible. Scrolling through his pictures, I noticed something else. There were photos from Savannah, taken just days ago. In one of them, he was sitting at a fancy restaurant, a woman's hand visible on the table across from him. Her nails were painted the exact same shade of red Beverly had on when she came home. I felt sick. My wife had lied to me, cheated on me, and paraded around in public with this idiot. But what hurt the most was the sheer disrespect, the fact that she didn't even bother to cover her tracks. It was like she thought I was too stupid or too weak to figure it out. When Beverly came home that evening, I was ready for her. I'd spent the entire day stewing, my anger building with every passing hour. But when she walked through the door laughing and acting like nothing had happened, I couldn't bring myself to confront her. Not yet. I needed to be smart about this. If she thought she was playing me, I'd play her right back. "Hey, Bev," I said, forcing a smile. "How was work?" "Exhausting," she replied, kicking off her heels and flopping onto the couch. "I'm so glad this week is over." I watched her, my stomach churning. How could she act so normal, so casual, after everything she'd done? But instead of lashing out, I kept my cool. "I was thinking," I said, sitting down beside her. "Maybe we should plan a little getaway. Just the two of us. It's been a while since we've had some quality time together." Her eyes widened slightly, and for a moment I saw something flash across her face. Guilt? Panic? I couldn't tell. But she quickly recovered, smiling at me like nothing was wrong. "That sounds nice," she said. "Let's talk about it this weekend." Her response only confirmed what I already knew. She wasn't interested in spending time with me. Her mind was still with Marshall, and I was just an obstacle she hadn't gotten rid of yet. But that was about to change. The next day, I started digging deeper. I combed through her social media, her emails, her work calendar, anything that might give me more information. And what I found made my blood run cold. Beverly wasn't just having an affair, she was living a double life. There were secret dinners, weekends away, even expenses she charged to our joint credit card without me noticing. It was all right there, in plain sight. One email in particular stood out. It was from her to Marshall, sent just a week before her trip. "Howard is clueless as always. I'll tell him I'm working late and he'll believe it. God, he's so pathetic sometimes." Pathetic. That's how she saw me. Not as her husband, her partner, but as some pathetic, clueless fool she could manipulate and mock. My hands clenched into fists as I read the email over and over, the words burning into my brain. But I wasn't pathetic, and I wasn't clueless. Beverly had underestimated me, and she was about to regret it. That night, as we sat down for dinner, I decided to push her buttons. "You've been working so hard lately," I said, keeping my tone light. "Why don't we go out this weekend? Maybe to that fancy Italian place you love?" Her fork paused midair, and she gave me a tight smile. "Oh, I don't know," she said, her voice a little too casual. "I might have some work to catch up on." "Work?" I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Of course." She narrowed her eyes at me, her smile faltering. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," I said, shrugging. "Just seems like you've been working an awful lot lately." Her face went pale, and for the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. She opened her mouth to say something, but I cut her off. "Don't worry," I said, smiling coldly. "I know how hard you've been working, Beverly. I know everything." She stared at me, her eyes wide, her fork clattering to her plate. And just like that, the cracks in her perfect facade began to show. Beverly's face went from pale to flushed in an instant. Her composure, normally so polished, so impenetrable, was gone. She looked like a cornered animal, desperate to escape, but unsure which direction to run. I sat back in my chair, watching her squirm, savoring the moment. I wasn't proud of it, but after everything I'd discovered, I couldn't help but feel a small, bitter sense of satisfaction. "What do you mean? You know everything," she finally managed to say, her voice shaky but still trying to sound indignant. "You're not making any sense, Howard." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. "Oh, I think I'm making perfect sense," I said calmly. "You see, while you were working late, while you were off at your conference, I've been doing a little digging. And guess what I found?" Her eyes darted toward her suitcase, still sitting by the front door. That told me all I needed to know. She was already panicking about what I might have seen, what I might have uncovered. "Howard, you're being ridiculous," she said, trying to regain her footing. "If you're upset about something, just say it. Don't play these games." "Games?" I said with a bitter laugh. "That's rich coming from you. You've been playing me for months, haven't you? Or should I say years?" Her jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought she might actually confess. But instead, she folded her arms and glared at me. "I don't know what you think you found, but I haven't done anything wrong. You're just being paranoid." "Paranoid," I repeated, my voice growing colder. "So the necklace I found in your suitcase, that's nothing, right? Just a gift you bought for yourself?" Her face went blank. It was the kind of blank that wasn't just surprise. It was the look of someone scrambling to think of an excuse. "What necklace?" she said, her voice a little too high-pitched. "I don't know what you're talking about." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the gold, heart-shaped necklace with the inscription, "To my love, always." I placed it on the table between us, watching her eyes widen as she stared at it. "This necklace," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "The one from your conference. The one I found buried at the bottom of your suitcase." She swallowed hard, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. That's just a client gift," she said weakly. "You know how those events are? They give out freebies all the time." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, really? Since when do conference freebies come with personalized inscriptions? To my love, always? That's quite the marketing strategy." She didn't respond. She just sat there staring at the necklace like it might explode. I could see the gears turning in her head, but no excuse was going to save her now. "And then there's this," I continued, pulling out the dinner receipt. I slid it across the table toward her. "Romantic corner table for two at the most expensive restaurant in Savannah. Funny, I don't remember you mentioning this networking dinner." Her hands clenched into fists, and for a moment, I thought she might lash out, but instead, she let out a shaky laugh, the kind of laugh people give when they know they're caught but can't admit it. "Howard, you're making a big deal out of nothing," she said, her voice trembling. "I went to dinner with a colleague, that's all it was. Strictly professional." "Professional?" I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Was it also professional when you sent this text?" I held up the burner phone. The screen lit up with one of her messages to Marshall. "Howard has no idea. God, he's so pathetic sometimes." Her face turned a deep shade of red. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. For the first time, she was truly speechless. "That's what you think of me, huh?" I said, my voice breaking despite my best efforts to stay composed. "I'm just some pathetic idiot who's too blind to see what's right in front of him." "Howard, she started, but I cut her off. "Save it," I snapped, standing up so quickly my chair nearly toppled over. "I don't want to hear your excuses, Beverly. I want the truth, and I mean all of it." She stood too, her hands trembling as she braced herself against the edge of the table. "You're blowing this out of proportion," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, I had dinner with Marshall. Yes, I might have said some things I shouldn't have, but it's not what you think. Nothing happened. Nothing happened," I said, my voice rising with each word. "Do you really think I'm that stupid? I've seen the messages, Beverly. I've seen the photos. Don't stand there and lie to my face." She flinched, and for a moment, I thought she might finally break down, but instead, she did something that shocked me to my core. She smiled. Not a nervous smile or a guilty smile, but a cold, cruel smile that sent chills down my spine. "You think you've got it all figured out, don't you?" she said, her voice suddenly calm and icy. "Well, let me tell you something, Howard. You don't know the first thing about me. You never have." I stared at her, my heart pounding in my chest. What the hell is that supposed to mean? It means, she said, leaning forward so her face was inches from mine. You're not ready for the truth. But don't worry, you'll find out soon enough. And with that, she turned and walked out of the room, leaving me standing there, shaking with anger and confusion. I had no idea what she meant, but one thing was clear. Whatever she was hiding, it was bigger than I'd imagined. Beverly's words echoed in my head long after she left the room. You're not ready for the truth, but don't worry, you'll find out soon enough. What could she possibly mean? What was left for her to reveal after everything I'd already discovered? My mind raced with possibilities, each one worse than the last. The next morning, she acted as though nothing had happened. She greeted me with a bright, almost mocking smile as she poured herself a cup of coffee. Good morning, Howard, she chirped. Did you sleep well? I couldn't even respond. I just stared at her, my chest tight with anger. How could she pretend everything was fine after what she'd said the night before? It was like she was daring me to do something, to confront her again. But I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. Not yet. As soon as she left for work, I decided to dig deeper. If she thought I didn't know the whole story, then I was going to make sure I uncovered every last detail. I started with her laptop, which she'd carelessly left open on the kitchen counter. She always kept her personal email separate from her work account, but she hadn't logged out. It was as if she thought I was too meek to look through her things. Her inbox was a gold mine. Dozens of emails from Marshall, some with subject lines that made my stomach churn. Counting the days until our next trip, last night was unforgettable. I can still smell you on my pillow. I clicked on one of the emails, my hands trembling. It was from 2 months ago. Beverly, you've changed my life. Every moment with you feels like a dream. I can't wait until we can finally stop sneaking around. I know it's hard, but it'll be worth it once you're free. You deserve so much more than Howard. He doesn't appreciate you the way I do. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just an affair. Marshall wasn't some fling. He was making plans with her. They were talking about a future together, and she was letting him. But the worst part wasn't the emails. It was the attachment at the bottom of one of them, a video file. My heart pounded as I clicked on it, not sure if I was ready for what I was about to see. The video started with Marshall holding the camera, grinning like an idiot. For my beautiful Beverly, he said, his voice sickeningly sweet. The camera panned to her, my wife, sitting on a hotel bed, laughing as she adjusted her hair. She was wearing the same red dress she'd worn when she left for Savannah. I couldn't watch anymore. I slammed the laptop shut, my hands shaking with rage. My head was spinning, my thoughts a jumbled mess of anger, heartbreak, and disbelief. How could she do this to me? How could she sit across from me at dinner, look me in the eyes, and pretend everything was fine while she was off living this double life? But as furious as I was, I knew I couldn't confront her yet. Not until I had everything I needed to expose her lies. If she thought she could manipulate me, if she thought she could keep me in the dark, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. That afternoon, I made a call to a private investigator. His name was Clyde, an older guy with a no-nonsense attitude and a reputation for being the best in the business. I told him everything. The emails, the messages, the burner phone, the video. He listened quietly, asking a few questions here and there. And by the end of the call, he promised to dig up everything he could on Beverly and Marshall. Give me a week, he said. You'll have everything you need to make your next move. That night, I did my best to act normal, even though every fiber of my being wanted to scream at her, to demand answers. But I kept my cool, playing the part of the clueless husband she thought I was. Beverly, meanwhile, was as smug as ever. She smiled at me over dinner, cracked jokes, even kissed me goodnight like nothing was wrong. It was infuriating. A few days later, Clyde called me with an update. You were right to be suspicious, he said. I've got surveillance footage, phone records, everything. Your wife and Marshall didn't just meet up in Savannah. They've been sneaking around for months. Weekends at hotels, dinners, even using your joint account to cover some of their expenses. My blood boiled. She was using my money to fund her affair. It was almost too much to process. But Clyde wasn't finished. There's more, he said, his voice grim. It looks like they've been planning something big. I don't want to jump to conclusions, but based on their messages and phone calls, it seems like they've been talking about starting a new life together. And it sounds like your wife's been looking into divorce proceedings. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. Divorce? She hadn't said a word to me about it. But now it all made sense. her coldness, her distance, her sudden trips. She was setting the stage to leave me, to run off with Marshall and start fresh, and she was doing it right under my nose. But if she thought she could blindside me, she was wrong. I wasn't going to let her get away with this, not without a fight. That evening, as we sat in the living room, I decided to test the waters. You know, I said casually, I was thinking about taking some time off work. Maybe we could go on a little trip together, somewhere nice, just the two of us. Beverly froze for just a fraction of a second before forcing a smile. Oh, that sounds great, she said, her voice just a little too bright. Where were you thinking? I don't know, I said, watching her carefully. Maybe Savannah? You seem to really enjoy it there. Her smile faltered, and for the briefest moment, I saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. Oh, I don't know if I want to go back there so soon, she said quickly. Maybe somewhere else. I nodded, hiding my smirk. She was scared. She knew I was onto her, even if she didn't know how much I had uncovered. And that fear was the first crack in her armor. But this was just the beginning. Beverly might think she was in control, but she was about to find out just how wrong she was. The following days were a whirlwind of quiet preparation. Clyde, the private investigator, continued feeding me information, and each new piece of evidence only solidified my resolve. Beverly wasn't just cheating. She was orchestrating my humiliation. It wasn't enough for her to betray me. She wanted to erase me, to leave me as nothing more than a bitter footnote in her new life with Marshall. Clyde's latest findings hit like a punch to the gut. Beverly had been in contact with a divorce attorney. She was quietly moving assets, opening private accounts, and worst of all, there were clear signs she was planning to hit me where it hurt the most, our house. She wanted to sell it before I even knew what was happening. That evening, after I tucked all the evidence into a secure folder, Clyde sent me one last bombshell. It was a recording from the hotel in Savannah. It wasn't just Beverly and Marshall together. It was a conversation that spelled out everything. Beverly's voice, smug and self-assured, rang out. Howard won't see it coming. He's so oblivious. By the time he realizes what's happening, Marshall and I will be halfway to Cabo. Marshall laughed, his voice dripping with arrogance. You really think he won't fight back? Fight back? Beverly scoffed. He doesn't have it in him. Howard's too soft, too scared of confrontation. He'll probably just cry and sign whatever papers I put in front of him. I clenched my fists so tightly my knuckles turned white. They didn't just think I was weak, they were banking on it. That was their whole plan, blindside me, bulldoze me, and leave me with nothing. But they were wrong. The following day, I called my lawyer, Ethan, a no-nonsense, sharp-as-a-tack kind of guy who had no patience for games. I laid everything out for him. The burner phone, the emails, the receipts, the recording. He listened quietly, his expression unreadable, before finally leaning back in his chair. Well, he said, if they think you're clueless, we're going to use that to our advantage. Ethan helped me set everything in motion. First, we froze the joint accounts so Beverly couldn't siphon any more money. Then, we drafted a restraining order to prevent her from selling the house. Finally, we prepared a set of divorce papers that would leave her with as little as legally possible. It was ruthless, but after everything she'd done, I didn't feel the slightest bit of guilt. The hardest part was playing along with Beverly at home. Every smile, every laugh, every fake kiss felt like a knife twisting in my gut. But I knew I had to keep up the act until the time was right. She couldn't know what I was planning. The tipping point came 2 days later. Beverly came home unusually late, reeking of expensive cologne that wasn't hers. She barely said 2 words to me before disappearing upstairs, claiming she was exhausted. I followed her quietly, watching as she slipped into the bedroom and shut the door behind her. This was it. I couldn't wait any longer. I knocked on the door and walked in without waiting for an answer. She was sitting on the bed, scrolling through her phone, and when she looked up at me, I saw the faintest flicker of guilt in her eyes. Howard, she said, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. Is everything okay? No, I said bluntly. We need to talk. Her smile wavered, and she set her phone down. All right, she said cautiously. What's on your mind? I pulled out the folder I'd prepared, thick with evidence, and dropped it on the bed beside her. This, I said, this is what's on my mind. She frowned, reaching for the folder, but the moment she opened it and saw the contents, her expression changed. Panic flickered across her face as she flipped through the emails, the receipts, the photos. And then she saw the transcript of the hotel recording. Her hands started to shake. "Howard," she began, her voice faltering. "I can explain." "Don't." I cut her off, my voice icy. "Don't insult me by pretending there's an explanation for this." She stared at me, her eyes wide, her lips trembling as she struggled to find the right words. But for once, she had nothing. No lies, no excuses, no way to worm her way out of this. "You thought I was too weak, too soft to figure it out, didn't you?" I said, my voice rising. "You thought you could just walk all over me, steal from me, humiliate me, and I'd just roll over and take it." "Howard, please," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's not what it looks like. Stop lying." I shouted, my anger finally boiling over. "It's exactly what it looks like. You've been cheating on me, planning to leave me, planning to destroy me. And for what? For him? For some washed-up high school boyfriend who can't even afford his own damn dinner." She flinched at that, her face crumpling. For a moment, I thought she might actually cry, but instead, she glared at me, her expression hardening. "You think you're so perfect, Howard?" she snapped. "You think you've been some kind of saint in this marriage? Maybe if you weren't so boring, so predictable, I wouldn't have needed to look elsewhere." Her words hit like a slap, but I didn't let her see the pain. Instead, I laughed, a cold, bitter laugh that made her flinch. "You know what, Beverly?" I said. "You're right. I was predictable. I trusted you. I supported you. I loved you. But that ends now." I pulled out the divorce papers and dropped them on the bed. "Sign these," I said, my voice steady. "Or don't. Either way, I'm done." She stared at the papers, her face pale, her hands trembling. "Howard," she said weakly, "we can work this out." "No," I said firmly. "You made your choice. Now live with it." And with that, I walked out of the room, leaving her sitting there, stunned. But this wasn't the end. Not yet. Beverly might have thought she was in control, but she was about to learn just how wrong she was. The silence that followed my exit from the bedroom was deafening. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the divorce papers I'd left behind, waiting for Beverly to make her move. Would she come storming out in anger, beg for forgiveness, or would she sink into the denial that had kept her afloat for months? I didn't care. I was done playing the part of the fool. The next morning, Beverly was eerily quiet. She avoided my gaze as she shuffled around the house, her usual smug demeanor replaced by something I couldn't quite place: fear, or the realization that she'd lost control of the narrative. For the first time in years, I felt like I was the one holding the cards. Clyde called me later that day with an update. "Marshall's been busy," he said, his tone grim. "It looks like he's been making some moves of his own." "What kind of moves?" I asked, already bracing myself for the worst. "He's been contacting your wife's lawyer," Clyde said. "Trying to expedite the divorce proceedings, pushing for a quick settlement. My guess? He's hoping to cash in before you can stop them." I felt a surge of rage, but it was quickly followed by determination. They thought they were smarter than me, faster than me, but I'd spent the past week preparing for this exact moment. "Let him try," I said. "I'm ready." That evening, Beverly finally broke her silence. I was sitting at the dining table, going over some work emails, when she came in and sat down across from me. Her face was pale, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Howard," she began, her voice trembling, "we need to talk." I looked up at her, keeping my expression neutral. "About what?" Her eyes darted to the divorce papers, which were still sitting untouched on the edge of the table. "About this. About us." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "There is no us, Beverly. Not anymore. You made sure of that." She flinched at my words, but pressed on. "I know I've made mistakes," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But we've been together for 10 years. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" I stared at her, stunned by her audacity. "You have the nerve to talk about what our marriage means after everything you've done? After the lies, the cheating, the scheming? You've been planning to destroy me, Beverly. You've been laughing at me behind my back, using me to fund your affair, and now you want to sit here and pretend like we can fix this." She opened her mouth to respond, but I didn't give her the chance. I leaned forward, my voice cold and steady. "You didn't just break my trust. You shattered it. And there's no coming back from that." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't feel an ounce of sympathy. She'd made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. "I'll sign the papers," she said finally, her voice cracking. "But please, don't make this ugly, Howard." Let's just end things quietly. I let out a bitter laugh. Quietly. You don't get to dictate how this ends, Beverly. Not after everything you've done. Her tears spilled over, but I stood up and walked away, leaving her sitting there alone. I didn't trust her tears anymore. They were just another manipulation, another way to try and control the situation. But I wasn't falling for it this time. The next day, Clyde sent me a file that sealed Beverly and Marshall's fate. It was a detailed report of their financial transactions. Every dinner, every hotel stay, every lavish gift Marshall had bought her with my money. But the best part? Marshall wasn't as well off as he pretended to be. He was drowning in debt, and the only reason he'd been able to keep up his flashy lifestyle was because Beverly had been footing the bill with my money. I took the file straight to Ethan, my lawyer. He didn't even bother hiding his smirk as he flipped through the pages. This is gold, he said. With this, we can not only block her from taking any more assets, but we can also make sure she's the one paying in the end. And that's exactly what we did. The day of the divorce hearing, Beverly walked into the courtroom with her head held high, Marshall trailing behind her like an overconfident lapdog. He gave me a smug grin as he passed, but I didn't even flinch. I was ready. Ethan presented our case with ruthless efficiency. He laid out every piece of evidence: the burner phone, the emails, the receipts, the financial records. By the time he was done, Beverly's confident facade had crumbled, and Marshall was squirming in his seat. But the real blow came when Ethan played the recording from the hotel. The judge's expression hardened as Beverly's voice echoed through the courtroom. Howard won't see it coming. He's so oblivious. By the time he realizes what's happening, Marshall and I will be halfway to Cabo. When the recording ended, there was a heavy silence in the room. Beverly wouldn't even look at me, her face pale and tear-streaked. Marshall, for all his bravado, looked like he wanted to crawl under the bench and disappear. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor. Beverly was ordered to return every cent she'd spent from our joint accounts. The house, the savings, everything. She lost it all. And Marshall? He was left with nothing but his debt and the realization that his little fantasy was over. As we left the courtroom, Beverly tried to approach me. "Howard, please," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to end like this." I looked at her, my heart heavy but resolute. "You meant for it to end with me broken and humiliated," I said. "You don't get to be sorry now." And with that, I walked away, leaving her and Marshall to face the ruins of their plans. Walking out of the courtroom that day was surreal. The past few weeks had been a storm of emotions: anger, betrayal, heartbreak. But now, for the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe. Beverly and Marshall had been exposed for who they truly were, and I'd taken back the power they thought I'd never find. As I stepped outside, the sun hit my face, and I felt an odd mix of relief and emptiness. The battle was over, but now I had to figure out what came next. 10 years of marriage, 10 years of memories, all reduced to ash. And yet, as painful as it was, I felt a spark of something new: freedom. That evening, I sat alone in the house. It was quiet, almost too quiet, but it was mine. The space felt different now, less like a shared home and more like a blank slate. I walked through the rooms, taking in the silence, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a strange sense of peace. Beverly's belongings were gone. She'd moved out the day after the hearing, leaving behind only a few pieces of furniture and a hollow apology written on a post-it note. I didn't bother reading it. Her words meant nothing now. A few days later, I met with Clyde to settle the final details of his investigation. He handed me the last of the files, a knowing smile on his face. "You did good, Howard," he said. "Most guys in your position would have folded, but you held your ground." "Barely," I admitted, shaking his hand. "But thanks for everything. I couldn't have done it without you." As I walked out of his office, I realized just how much had changed. The man I'd been before all this, the passive, trusting husband who ignored the warning signs, was gone. In his place was someone stronger, someone who'd learned the hard way that trusting the wrong people can cost you everything. The next few weeks were a blur of rebuilding. I threw myself into work, started hitting the gym, and even reconnected with a few old friends I'd lost touch with over the years. Slowly but surely, I began to feel like myself again, or maybe a version of myself I hadn't been in a long time. One afternoon, while sorting through some old papers, I found a photo of Beverly and me from our wedding day. We were smiling, carefree, blissfully unaware of what the future would hold. I stared at the photo for a long time before finally placing it in a box with the rest of the memories I didn't need anymore. I wasn't going to let her define my life any longer. As for Beverly and Marshall, their fantasy world didn't last long. Clyde kept me updated on their situation, and it was almost poetic how quickly things fell apart for them. Marshall's debt caught up with him, and Beverly found herself footing the bill for a man who clearly wasn't the knight in shining armor she'd imagined. From what I heard, they were living in a cramped apartment on the outskirts of town, their grand plans reduced to a reality neither of them wanted. I didn't take pleasure in their downfall, not really, but I couldn't help but feel a sense of closure, knowing they'd reaped what they'd sown. One evening, I decided to take a walk around the neighborhood. The air was crisp, the sky painted in shades of orange and pink as the sun set. I passed by familiar houses, waved to a few neighbors, and for the first time in months, I felt content. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine again. And as I looked up at the sky, I realized something. Beverly's betrayal had broken me, yes, but it had also set me free. I wasn't trapped in a lie anymore. I wasn't tied to someone who didn't value me. I was free to start over, to rebuild, to find happiness on my own terms. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I was ready.